Right, hello everyone. Yes, I want to cover the Golden Penetrators angle of the Manson case because obviously I've now read out Rudy Outerbelly talking in court and Garrettson and the maid from Cielo Drive. And Outerbelly mentions Terry Melcher and Gregg Jakobson, and they both also testified in court. So the logical conclusion is to read them out eventually, isn't it, as well? But before I do that, I wanted to talk about this because you'll find that what they say doesn't sound very truthful in court, and the reason for that is because, well, yeah, it's important to talk about it because they lied about it because yes, Manson went to prison for offences relating to the Mann Act. He was actually on a suspended sentence, but because he was arrested for Mann Act offences, which is transporting women for immoral purposes, that was what he went to prison for and what he had just been released from prison for. So and then he's running around Hollywood with all these girls. Well, he was probably doing the same thing, wasn't he? Obviously, he was sex trafficking these girls to people like Terry Melcher, and some of them were underage. And allegedly, Terry Melcher was really into one of the underage girls that Charles Manson was trafficking around Hollywood. And so this had to be covered up, basically. So this is why Terry Melcher denies he met Manson more than 3 times, and they lie about how he met Dennis Wilson as well. Apparently, he actually met Dennis Wilson at Gary Hinman's house, and if you look for I've done a clip of it as well. There's a video of the section from the Manson file called "Cupid, If You Please." He talks about Dennis Wilson there and how Charlie actually met him before. So the whole story we hear is totally different. And Manson's connections to the music industry started while he was in prison. Phil Kaufman wasn't the first person he met, and all these sorts of things, And so, we need to talk about the Golden Penetrators, basically. And so, I've chosen to read an extract of Jeff Guinn's book because there's loads and loads of articles. And I was going to also talk to you more about who Terry Melcher is because he was a really influential producer. He produced Mr. Tambourine Man and stuff like that, And so, it's kind of disappointing that, the father, so he sort of started folk rock in a way. And he was one of the big bag of perverts that runs the music industry by the sound of things. Yeah, I'll get to reading, but because this is a live stream, I'll just chat to the audience for a second, and I'll make sure there's chapters. And I'm also going to talk a bit about Doris Day as well, because Terry Melcher was Doris Day's son, and it's like a rich tapestry, Doris Day's life, as to why Terry Melcher was as messed up as he was. Yeah, if you look at Doris Day's marriages and who Terry Melcher's biological father was, and then what happened with the man who adopted him. So I'm going to get into that as well. But yeah. But yeah, so how is everyone? Anyway, the Wrecking Crew, and because Terry Melcher was the guy who said that only Roger McGuinn was good enough to record. So on Mr. Tambourine Man, the only real person playing is Roger McGuinn, and all the rest of them were replaced by the Wrecking Crew, and that was Terry Melcher. So he's like quite a famous figure, and it's just weird. But music's dead to me now after studying the Manson case for any length of time. I don't treasure anything anymore. So it's very depressing. But yes, like I say, it's pretty obvious what Manson was doing in Hollywood, wasn't it? He wasn't just trying to get a record deal. He was human trafficking women around, and this is happening still now. So it ties in with what's going on with P. Diddy and all that. It's obviously just got worse over the years. It hasn't got better. And when you talk about the Golden Penetrators as well, it makes it sound like these were the only guys doing that. It sounds like everywhere, all across the music industry, this was, blanket what they were doing. Yeah, the Wrecking Crew, the CIA house band. Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Right. Yeah, I'll probably start reading because I haven't got that much to read out. But the stuff about Doris Day gets quite odd as well. Oh, so that's them. Obviously, Terry Melcher. And that's Gregg Jakobson and Dennis Wilson stood together. I couldn't get a picture of all 3 of them together. That doesn't exist, unfortunately. But Gregg Jakobson was close to Doris Day. Like I say, I could have read out far more about how they met and everything. They met because Gregg Jakobson worked on Doris Day's show, and Terry was writing the music for it or something like that at the time. Right, and this is from Manson, The Life and Times of Charles Manson by Jeff Guinn. On a summer night in 1968, 3 cars eased down Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles. They headed for the tricked-up portion of the long winding street known as the Strip, a 1.7-mile stretch of nightclubs, shops and restaurants that was one of the epicenters of cutting-edge counterculture in America. 380 miles to the north, Haight-Ashbury neighborhood in San Francisco still clung to its reputation as the capital city of flower power and hippie love-ins, but its pretensions of leading the world into a new era of enlightenment through great music, free love, and mind-expanding chemicals, and disdain for class-conscious capitalist beliefs were dissolving into drug-addled violence. Sunset Strip was about music, sex, and drugs too, but few among the amped-up throngs packing its sidewalks pretended their motivations were anything other than self-indulgent. As civil disorder swept the rest of America in response to Vietnam and racial unrest, the only major uprising on the Strip involved the closing of a popular club and the enforcement of a 10 p.m. curfew for those under 18. Young people flocked to the Haight in hopes of finding utopia. Youthful pilgrims came to LA with the dream of becoming friends with celebrities and becoming rich and famous themselves. Such dreams were encouraged by the Strip's traditional egalitarianism. Stars performing in or visiting many of its famous clubs were expected to mingle with the public, chatting amiably as if with equals, and in the case of those who've made it in the record business, offering advice to the endless stream of wannabes who felt certain that their self-penned songs about love, spirituality, and revolution would make them as big as the Beatles, or even bigger. The young men behind the wheels of the 3 cars inching down the Sunset, sometimes it could take hours to manoeuvre through the traffic and crowds along the Strip, were out for a night of fun and basking in the celebrity they'd worked so hard to attain. Terry Melcher, Gregg Jakobson, and Dennis Wilson had been close friends for years. Individually, they'd reached separate pinnacles in the music business. Melcher as a producer, Jakobson as a talent scout, recording session organizer, and Wilson as the drummer for the Beach Boys, and thus the most famous of the trio. Together, they were part of an informal society known as the Golden Penetrators. Its membership was limited to anyone who had sex with women from one of the show business's most famous families. It wasn't the most exclusive of organizations. Some of these women were every bit as promiscuous as the men pursuing them. The Melcher-Jacobson-Wilson triumvirate revelled in their hedonism. In a city that had long ago waived most moral or legal limits for the famous, their philosophy was, we're us, there are no rules, we get to do this. And I highlighted that statement because, that seems to apply a blanket across the music industry, and the way they were behaving in the 90s and what's coming out about how, Sean Combs behaved sounds very similar. These people, once they get to the top, think they can just get away with whatever they want. And he did. Well, they all did. I think they've all died without ever facing any... Yeah, is Gregg Jakobson dead? I know Wilson and Melcher are. They never faced any justice, did they? Yeah, and like I say, there's a lot more I could tell you about Terry Melcher and all that. And because he recorded songs as well under the name Terry Day. And there's pictures of the album cover of that and all that, I could have showed you. But I'll make sure all these things are linked in the description. Like there's loads of articles that you can read if you're interested in hearing more about Terry Melcher and more detail about the Golden Penetrators. And that was from Jeff Guinn's book, like I say. And the stuff about Doris Day, I'll get to in a minute, because that's crazy. Yeah, people were mentioning that in the comments, the club Pandora's Box, and they were saying that that's where everyone bought pornography as well, bought and sold pornography. Pandora's Box. Yeah, but apparently the song, what's it called? For What It's Worth by Crosby, Stills and Nash was actually about that riot over the club shutting down. Everyone thinks it was an anti-war song, but it's not. It's just about watching the chaos unfold of that riot. Because it wasn't really like that worth writing and smashing up vehicles, was it? So it's actually not an anti-war song, which is interesting. Taylor Swift is the new Beatles. Practically, isn't she? Yeah. They use her for brainwashing people. But it's not working, is it now? Everyone's lost all faith in celebrities. No one listens to them anymore. Too much has come out about what they're all doing. Yeah, Buffalo Springfield, but Crosby is one of them, isn't he? Who are they? Who are fucking Buffalo Springfield? Can't remember their names. Excuse me, just drinking my tea. But yeah, so yeah, that's part of it. Oh, you're at the show with Arthur Lee and Arthur Brown. That must have been an interesting show. Bloody hell. Well, is that the one where they all rioted, you mean? Because, yeah, that is like the famous one, and that is apparently, yeah, what Buffalo Springfield wrote that song about, yeah. Yeah, that's it. So celebrities started telling you who to vote for instead of just to vote, yeah. Like I said, there's loads of footage of P. Diddy talking to Barack Obama before he got elected as well. It looked like some kind of, like hustings event where they were just talking to all the different candidates. But there's loads of clips of P. Diddy talking to Barack Obama. And then photos of him at one of P. Diddy's private estates as well. So, like, yeah. I wonder if he's got blackmail material on all the Democrats, and that's what's going on there. So yeah, this goes on still today, doesn't it? And the Golden Penetrators was just the start of it, just the thin end of it. It's got worse now, if anything, because it's easier to film people, isn't it, and have hidden cameras and to distribute the films as well. Because back then as well, you have to remember these people, they had tapes, and only the very richest people had the tape player to actually play the thing. So it wasn't like quite so bad. But if one leaked, because not everyone could play it. But nowadays it's not like that, is it? Everything's digital. You can just go on the internet and millions can see it immediately. It's terrible. Huh. Oh, they met at the Whiskey A Go-Go, did they? Yeah, I've never read where they met, yeah. But that sounds believable, yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's it. You have to be a platinum penetrator to get away with it these days, yeah. That's it. Well, they're not getting away with it anymore, are they? The world's not having it anymore. But it's shocking that P. Diddy got away with it for as long as he did, which makes you think he's blackmailing people. And I always wonder about Roman Polanski as well. Why was Roman Polanski gotten away with so much? Because he got stuff from the 60s even. Or later. Because you got to think most of the people that he must have filmed dirt on in the 60s must be like gone and dead by now, though. So yeah, what's he got on people now? Yeah. Friend of Diddy. Yeah. Right. I'll get on with reading the stuff about Doris Day. Still drink on a bit. Like I say, I've called this from various articles, and it's mainly quotes from her biography, and I'll link all the articles in the description so you can see where I got it all from. But it's mainly just quoting her biography, I think. Right, Doris Day, who was born Doris von Koppelhoff, arrived in Hollywood when she was still in her teens, ready to pursue a singing career after a car accident in which she broke both her legs kept her from a dancing career. In her memoir, Doris Day, Her Own Story, the late performer had some confessions to make and some truth bombs to drop on her legions of adoring fans. When you saw her, what you saw on screen is not what was happening in the Hollywood world of the 40s and 50s. After 27 years of band singing, radio nightclub appearances, recording, movie and television acting, my public image is unshakably that of America's wholesome virgin, the girl next door, carefree and brimming with happiness, Day wrote in her book, according to Cheat Sheet. An image, I can assure you, is more make-believe than any film part I ever played. I find that an interesting quote from her as well, yeah. She was portrayed like a virgin in The Girl Next Door, but yeah, wait till you hear about her life. Right, Al Jorden. When she married Al Jorden, she was just in her teens and new to the Hollywood scene. Nobody watching her perform with big bands and in her first movie roles would have ever imagined what was going on behind closed doors in their short-lived union. I was married at 17 to a psychopathic sadist, Day wrote in Doris Day in Her Own Story, before describing an episode of jealousy that led to violence after she received a gift from a man she worked with. The minute we walked into our apartment, he spun me round and hit me in the face, Day wrote. I put up my hands to protect myself, but he hit me again and again, knocking me into the furniture and against the wall. All the while he was yelling at me in an uncontrollable rage. You tramp, you call that a wife, running up and down the stairs so all the men could take a good look up your skirt. Right. After the incident, the two were walking by a newsstand in New York, and they noticed in another incident, a magazine cover in which she was wearing a swimsuit, and he slapped her repeatedly right there on the street in front of plenty of witnesses. She said later that he called her a dirty whore so many times that she lost count. Over time, the violent incidents grew more frequent and more terrifying, with Jorden beating her when she was pregnant and refusing to have an abortion. He even intended to kill her, the baby, and then himself at one point. He got her alone in a car and pointed the gun at her stomach, but she managed to talk him out of it. Instead, he beat her when they got home. She gave birth to a son, Terry Paul Jorden, on February the 8th, 1942. He would turn out to be her only child. Following his birth, the beatings continued. At one point, Al Jorden became so violent she was forced to physically lock him out of the home. And when he was in the house, he refused to let Day care for the baby, beating her when she tried to comfort the crying infant during the night. Any hope Day might have had of having a happy home life disappeared. The following year, Day filed for divorce, later writing that I was indeed terribly young, and Al certainly would be a rotten father. Al Jorden continued to suffer from what they now believe to be schizophrenia, and shot himself in 1967. At barely 18 years old and with an infant son to support, Doris Day went back to work singing and acting, soon regaining her stardom. She rejoined the Les Brown Band, and her recordings began to chart higher than they ever had before. What's more, by the late 1940s and early 1950s, they had broken into films as well. By the end of the 1950s, her film career, particularly the romantic comedies starring alongside Rock Hudson and James Garner, made her one of the most popular entertainers in the nation. George Weidler, don't know how to pronounce that. Doris didn't marry again until 1946 when she wed saxophonist George Weidler. They raised eyebrows before they became husband and wife, with the pair sharing hotel rooms in days when such behaviour was considered scandalous. Unlike Al, George wasn't violent, but he reportedly resented being a stepfather to Doris's son and had a wandering eye. He cheated on her during their short-lived marriage and apparently couldn't handle how big of a star she'd become, and the couple divorced in 1949. And you get Marty Melcher. In 1951, a 29-year-old Doris married her third husband, Marty Melcher. Despite the marriage lasting until he died in 1968, Marty didn't treat Doris well either. Marty pushed her into taking roles that would earn her big money, but then secretly embezzled funds from her bank account, leaving her broke when he died, and she discovered his actions. He also beat her son, Terry, causing a rift that led to the couple living separate lives despite living in the same house for much of their later years together. Day wrote in her book, Doris Day, Her Own Story, that her husband and his lawyer, Jerome Rosenthal, plotted behind her back to wipe out the millions she earned, and that's exactly what they did. Her $20 million fortune had gone, replaced with a $450,000 debt, which she owed mostly for taxes. It was Terry who broke the news to her that Marty Melcher had left her broke. Not only that, she had a tax debt of nearly $500,000, which ultimately impacted her net worth. Melcher had even borrowed money against her record contract for songs she had not yet recorded, and had signed her on to do a television series that she had no idea about until weeks before filming was to start. And the advance on the TV series had already been spent. While Day sued Jerome Rosenthal and ran a settlement of $22.8 million, she didn't even see a fraction of that money. In a 1986 interview, Day's son Terry claimed that she only received some money from an insurance company, but that wasn't close to the nearly $23 million she sued for. According to the New York Times, to make ends meet, Day did the sitcom her late husband had contracted her to do, and the Doris Day Show ran for 5 seasons. Right, so right before these crimes happened, Terry Melcher's mother had lost her entire fortune, basically. So yeah, I find that really interesting. Because yeah, people were saying Terry was skint as well because the Beach Boys were starting to fail on that. So like they'd had their time, they'd had their hits. Bands only have a certain amount of time where they make hits, and that was running out, and he was running out of things to do, so he was getting desperate. And this Barry Comden, he sounds like he was actually all right. He wasn't a bad guy. I'll read it out anyway. Yeah. Barry Comden, Doris's last husband, who she married in 1976 at the age of 52, was Barry 12 years her junior. They stayed together for 5 years before calling it off after drifting apart and being incompatible. One source of contention was said to be Doris's affection for her pets, with Barry complaining that she liked the company of her dogs more than him. She had 14 dogs, and the final straw was when I was kicked out of bed to make way for Tiger, her poodle, he told the Sunday Mail in 1996. So yeah, at least her last husband, though she divorced him, wasn't evil to her. But yes, it's very interesting. Yeah, that just before these crimes happened, Doris Day had just lost all that money, and this is the guy that sort of raised Terry Melcher as his own, or adopted him at least. And I could not find any more detail about the fact he's supposed to have beaten Terry, as well. That's all it says is he beat Terry, and so it's like that's it. There's no more detail about that, and that caused a rift between them. But she didn't leave him. And yeah, but that's kind of quite shows why Melcher was desperate for money. And also, yeah, it's important that the one thing that you won't read about if you only read the official narrative and what it says in books like Helter Skelter and that, you won't read about Terry sleeping with Charles Manson's girls and actually meeting him way more times than just the 3 times he owns up to. Yeah, this is why I wanted to cover it. Yeah, that's it. What a story. Like I say, I'd not heard this, but like I say, Doris Day, well, she would have been famous back then in this country as famous, but she's not sort of that big that her memories lasted over here so much, not as big as someone like Monroe or whatever. But yeah, it sounds awful. Like his dad sounds like an absolute maniac as well, his actual biological father. And yeah, and they say, that even though he would have been a tiny baby when all this was going on, it does actually affect your development. He would have heard all that. And the fact that she wasn't letting her go to care for him at night is concerning as well and stuff like that, isn't it? And he must have been hearing him beating his mother and all this sort of thing. And while she was pregnant, he was beating her while she was pregnant as well. That can have an impact on the baby. Terrible stuff. And then, yeah, she was completely screwed over by her third husband. He was her third husband. But yeah, and she didn't find out until he died. He'd been spending all her money. He basically spent all her money and left her with a massive tax debt, hadn't paid her taxes. It was terrible. What do you mean, Terry Melcher? Who? Who are you talking about? Oh yes, and another thing that someone found as well, Josh Casey found another article, because like I say, where I've been talking about all the weird rumours and trying to track down the source for it all, and that we found previously thought the earliest time anyone mentioned the tapes at Cielo Drive was when Dennis Hopper was interviewed for that American Dreamer movie. But no, we found a newspaper article from November of 1969 that mentions tapes being found at the house. Yeah, but it doesn't say anything about them being pornographic. The first person who says that they're pornographic was Dennis Hopper, I think. Yeah. So yeah, there's a reference to there being tapes found at Cielo Drive from November of 1969. It's the earliest one we found so far, and I've shared that article on the subreddit and in the Facebook group. Yeah, this will probably be quite a short one because, like I say, I could read out loads about who Terry Melcher is and who Gregg Jakobson is exactly. But yeah, all you really need to know for the purposes of this is, they were producers, and Gregg Jakobson was like a talent scout, and he was a drummer himself as well. I've been reading a lot about him as well. He was a drummer himself. He played drum solos on one of Dennis Wilson's tracks or something like that. Yeah, and they tried to record a thing called an album called Bamboo. Dennis Wilson was recording a solo album that never got released. And yeah, I had read that they were trying to actually get properly mastered tracks of that because there was a terrible bootleg, and that should have come out in 2018 if it ever came out. But yeah, Dennis Wilson did an album called Bamboo, and Gregg Jakobson played drums on it. Because yeah, people were saying in the Facebook group as well, someone had called Terry Melcher a musician, and technically, and someone said he wasn't a musician, he was a producer. But so technically, he was a musician as well. He did write songs. He wrote Kokomo as well. That's another thing Terry Melcher is famous for. Kokomo, which was the only number one the Beach Boys ever had, wasn't it? I was shocked by that. I thought that they would have had some in the 60s. I think the Beatles actually didn't have many number ones either. If you look at these things, that's the weird thing about these bands that we call the superstars. Actually, if you look at how they charted, they didn't chart that well. And record companies actually lost a lot of money in the 60s and early 70s. That's why everyone started losing their contracts in the 70s because they realised how much money they'd wasted on all these psychedelic projects, that didn't really sell that well. It's just a niche thing, isn't it, really? It's not something that sells that well. Yeah, that's Gregg Jakobson. Gregg Jakobson played the drums, apparently. Yeah, I read about him, yeah. And also, yeah, just in the course of researching this as well, I found they were going to make a film about Dennis Wilson, and they tried to get Taylor Hawkins from the Foo Fighters to play Dennis Wilson, but he was already busy making a movie about Iggy Pop. and he played Iggy Pop apparently. So the film about Dennis Wilson never got made. And Taylor Hawkins has died now, hasn't he? So yeah, Taylor Hawkins ain't going to be able to play him. But someone still has the copyright to that movie and might make it. But obviously, it's not going to be Taylor Hawkins that plays him now, is it? Yeah, just weird facts that I've found as I was researching this stream. Like I say, if all the articles that I'm looking at, everything that I'm reading that I find, I share in my Facebook groups and on the subreddit. You know, so like not everything am I going to read out, but you know, I share it all. There's a lot just online. You don't have to buy a lot of books nowadays. You know, most of what you need is actually online. But yes, there's a lot of people, like there's videos on YouTube where people have done really, really good videos with really high production values, and they've done research, but they've read, you know, like the doctored version of what happened and about, you know, where Charles Manson met Dennis Wilson and all that. Like I say, the extract from the Manson file, Cupid If You Please, that talks about all this sort of stuff, you know. Like I said it earlier, didn't I? I assure you that Tex Watson actually lived at Dennis Wilson's house for longer than Charles Manson did. In fact, I read recently someone said that Charles Manson never really actually lived there. He just was around a lot. He visited it a lot. He was around there a lot, but he didn't actually officially live there, like they say he did. They said they all just moved in and like sponged off Dennis Wilson, but apparently Manson didn't actually really live there. They were just around a lot, you know. Everything's been exaggerated and, you know, made Manson to look like the total manipulative bad guy. And he was sex trafficking women around Hollywood and using them, even if they were not directly paying him to sleep with the girls. He was using them, you know, to get into the music industry, wasn't he? That sort of thing. But yeah, and the reason that they want to cover it up is because, yeah, all the men who partook of sleeping with those girls also should have been prosecuted under the Mann Act as well, shouldn't they? And gone to prison for sex trafficking because they were doing it. And some of the girls were underage as well. That's the worst thing. You know, and this is all alleged, we have to say, for legal reasons. But yeah. The strong rumour is that most gets repeated is that Terry Melcher was really into Ruth Ann Morehouse, who was Dean Morehouse's daughter. And Dean Morehouse lived with Dennis Wilson as well, and actually stayed at the guest house in Cielo Drive at one point while Terry Melcher was living there. And yeah, he's supposed to have been, you know, the rumour is, for legal reasons, we have to say, he was really into Ruth Ann Morehouse, who was underage. Which is, yeah, another thing they were trying to cover up, because obviously they all would have gone to prison, wouldn't they? Everyone would have. And yeah, it's interesting to point out as well, because other people have pointed this out, like you get only a few celebrities who will admit they knew Charles Manson. Like Neil Young has said it, and Michael Caine has admitted that he met him at a party. But all the men who will admit that they met Charles Manson are probably ones who never slept with his girls. That's the only reason they'll talk about it. And so a lot of celebrities probably don't want to mention they met Charles Manson because they did sleep with these sex trafficked girls, you know, so they're admitting to a criminal offence sort of thing. But yeah, all the men that admit they met Manson probably were confident that they hadn't ever slept with any of his girls or got on any of the tapes that were being made or whatever, so yeah, they're confident talking about it. Yeah, Pacific, yeah, that's another album Dennis Wilson recorded, yeah. Pacification Blue. No one lost money on the Beatles, all their stuff was number one. Yeah. Yeah, fucking they probably got ripped off by their record companies. The Rolling Stones, though, is actually really interesting. They started their own publishing company quite early on. So the Rolling Stones were keeping all their own money. No one owned them in the end. I think they lost money on their first few albums, but not everything else. They started their own publishing company. That's why Mick Jagger and Keith Richards are so rich. They own the publishing rights to all their own stuff and a load of other people's stuff. They have 3 different publishing companies, the Rolling Stones. Crazy. Yeah, and did they reach number 1 in America as well? Because I know, yeah, there was a backlash against them. But when was that? Was that how late was that? That was probably quite late, wasn't it? And did that really affect people buying their records as well? It looked dramatic and like a lot of people buying their records, but did it really actually impact the amount of people that bought their records when John Lennon said the Jesus comment? I don't think it really did. Did it? Yeah. Yeah, Cease to Exist. Yeah, I shared that in the Facebook group as well. Yeah, it is quite good, but it still gets some facts wrong. Like, the official narrative of Charles Manson getting into the music industry is that he met Phil Kaufman first, and Dennis Wilson, and also that he was never really going to get a contract. They turned him down. But actually, no. If you look at the facts, he actually was very close to being recorded, and he was recorded a couple of times. And you could criticize what he recorded, but you got to remember he never had the opportunity to really sit down with producers and arrangers and have his sound tweaked. And it sounds like he was quite difficult to work with as well. But if people had sat and explained what was going on better to him, he might have been, and he'd had the opportunity to work with proper producers and arrangers. His stuff probably would have sounded as good as everyone else's, So he wasn't a shit musician that never made it, It was the fact he shot Bernard Crowe made him unpopular. Basically, they couldn't bloody work with him anymore after that. Yeah, they're bankrupt in 1970. Let's go to tax exile. Yeah, it's after Sticky Fingers. Yeah, you're right. And there's some stuff with Marshall Chess as well. Marshall Chess, the blues record label guy in America. They contacted America, and they stopped talking to him. He stopped talking to them after he was ODing on heroin one night, and he rang Keith Richards for help, and Keith Richards just hung up on him. So that was one of the stories I read when I was looking into the Rolling Stones. Yeah. Hmm. Huh. Sorry, just looking at the chat for a second. Yeah, Jagger went to the London School of Economics. I want to do a stream about this one day, actually, because this is crazy. All the musicians that are thought of as guitar virtuosos, and you think all these people must have music degrees, right? But you look into what they actually studied, and it's like, what? No, none of them actually studied music at all. It's mental. And you can see why, like, Dave McGowan type theories managed to make such leeway, because when you realise these guys, none of them studied music, so how were they all such amazing arrangers and writing all these songs? It does seem like stuff was written for them. And you do hear that the Wrecking Crew played, only Roger McGuinn was good enough to play, and everyone else was replaced by the Wrecking Crew and that sort of thing. But in those days, they were very much more obsessed with classical perfection, and actually the musicians probably were good enough to record. It was just people were very fussy in them days. There's this whole thing about the woman who's like the world's most famous soprano, or was at the time, but no one knew it because she was ghost voicing for all the movie stars. Forget her name, but her son is Andrew Gold, the guy that did Never Let Her Slip Away and Lonely Boy. It's his mother, and she sang for Audrey Hepburn and Natalie Wood, and she did all these jingles. So, like, for the amount you would have heard her voice, she was the most well-known singer in the world, but you never saw her face. That sort of thing. Yeah, Jim Morrison. Jim Morrison only wrote the lyrics as well, didn't he? Jim Morrison wasn't a musician. Yeah, that's the other thing. It was Ray Manzarek is supposed to be the composer of all the melodies, isn't he? Jim Morrison only wrote the lyrics. And I'm guessing, what did Robbie Krieger perform his own guitar parts? But like Dave McGowan alleges that, yeah, the Doors are some of the people that were replaced by the Wrecking Crew. It wasn't actually them playing and stuff like that. I think Ray Manzarek probably was playing, but yeah, they say that. But yeah, I'm sure they dispute that if you ask them though as well. But yeah. Yeah. Oh, what? Doris Day's house in Carmel looked like Cielo Drive inside. Is it just the same style of house? Yeah, maybe, yeah. Weird though, isn't it? Yeah. And also you find out if you watch that stream I did about Rudy Altabelli, not reading out his trial transcript, but just talking about him and how he lived up there with Olivia Hussey, the actress who got raped up there. And she was saying that she didn't mind it. She stayed up there. And Terry Melcher went back after the murders and had a relationship with her up there. Again, she would have only been about 18 years old. So again, another young one he was chasing after. Crazy. Yeah. Marshall Chess is interesting because I looked at it because I wanted to see if he's contactable, to ask him for comment about what he would say to Keith Richards if he knew now. And also, yes, because not many people have even watched it, but I found that Chain Walk drug bust, the police documents for that. And there was nothing when I paid to get them, but there was nothing that says I couldn't publish them, so I have shown them all publicly. And when Keith Richards was nicked in London, he tried to blame Marshall Chess for all the drugs in the house. He said, "Oh no, I'm letting the house to Marshall Chess. We're only here for one night. All these drugs and guns belong to Marshall Chess." And so I was going to try and get a comment from him to say, "What do you think about that?" Now, I thought, well, after all these years, he's probably got nothing to say. And I was able to find out as well that stuff about he OD'd and rang Keith for help, and Keith just hung up on him and left him. Yeah. Yeah, well, everyone at that point was influenced by the blues, weren't they? Because before, all our guitar virtuosos, just before the blues hit, were into jazz, like Brian Jones and Richard Thompson. People like that all learned jazz first, and so that's why in folk rock you get so many crazy chords, because they all knew jazz. They all learned jazz before they learned blues and folk. Yeah. Yeah. Olivia Hussey's balcony scene was the highlight of ninth grade English. Yeah, she played Juliet, didn't she? That's what she was famous for. Yeah, he's alive apparently. Yeah, I think that from what I can glean from the channel, though, I don't think he manages the channel. It's something that's recorded and then put up for him. But he does a podcast. He's on Chess Records. You can find the YouTube channel. Yeah, and he talks about all the blues artists that he represented and that sort of thing. Yeah, interesting. And I haven't seen him say anything about Keith Richards. I wanted to see if I could get a comment about that, because I wonder if he knows that. If he knows that Keith Richards tried to totally blame him. Because that would have stopped him from being allowed back into the country and shit like that. If they had taken Keith Richards seriously and gone and nicked Marshall Chess, it would have prevented him from being able to travel back to England or shit like that, So yeah, great friend, Yeah, yeah, jazz chords. Richard Thompson, yeah, if you're a guitarist, yeah, bloody look up some of Richard Thompson stuff. Well, you can't even find the real chords to Sandy Denny stuff unless you buy books. But yeah, absolutely mental chords. They add extra notes or take away notes to make it sound more psychedelic and magical sort of thing. Hmm. Yeah, Ginger Baker and Charlie Watts, yeah, we're all into jazz. They all learned jazz first. Probably Clapton as well. Clapton was really, really into the blues, wasn't he, apparently, from an early age. Had to go to the obscure. But I read another thing about Charlie Watts as well. Charlie Watts never had any drum lessons whatsoever. He apparently learned just from watching other drummers. And I think sometimes these guys lie as well. They because it doesn't sound cool to say they studied for years. Maybe they're lying. But yeah, that's another one. Another really famous drummer who never actually studied the drums at all. A lot of these instrumentalists, it's kind of questionable, Mick Jagger had an economics degree, but he doesn't sing like he's bloody had any musical training anyway. His timing has to be good, obviously, but that's it. He doesn't sing like he's trained. Eric Clapton went to art school, didn't study music, studied art. Sandy Denny went to art school, didn't study music, studied art, and was studying to be a nurse, actually trained in nursing. Most of the Bonzo Dog Band went to the same art school. They all studied art, not music. Yeah. Yeah, Legion Leaf. Yeah, well, that was Richard Thompson and Sandy Denny in it, yeah. But yeah, none of these people actually studied music. Like, one of the only people that you can find who did, Mick Ronson, who did a lot of David Bowie's arrangements, did all the arrangements for Ziggy Stardust and that. He actually studied music. It's documented that he studied music. But fucking very few of them actually studied music. And composing and arranging isn't just nothing. It's not something that you could learn that easily from just sitting and watching others. So once they've been in the business for years and they've sat down with producers, you can be taught basic composition on a piano and that, but it's complicated shit. a lot more is done behind the scenes by people you've never heard of than the original. All these people like Taylor Swift and that, she's not writing all those arrangements herself. You know what I mean? They say she wrote the song, but yeah, she might have written the words and done basic chords on a guitar. But then a producer comes in and does a whole other arrangement, and you know what I mean? It's like, it's crazy. Yeah. Yeah, he was influenced by all sorts. Albert King, leading Strange Brew. And what's he called? Robert Johnson. Obviously, really influenced Clapton as well, didn't he? Yeah, that's it. With jazz is like really, really complicated, isn't it? And it's supposed to be like trying to break rules as well, isn't it? That's the point of jazz, is to not obey rules. So you have to know a lot. You have to be classically trained, don't you? Basically, to know how to break the rules, you have to know the rules, don't you? You know, yeah. And the blues still has rules, though, doesn't it? The blues is still, but it's quite slightly easier, isn't it? I think, to master and powerful. Yeah. Yeah, Lennon went to art school as well. Fucking, if you look at it, loads of these musicians all went to the same art school in London as well. It's crazy. Cat Stevens, Sandy Denny, all the Bonzo Dog Band all went to this same art school. None of them fucking studied music or did music lessons in school or out like that. If you read like Eric Clapton's biographies and stuff like that, he ended up getting into grammar school on an art scholarship because an art teacher saw him paint and thought he was a good painter, so he got into grammar school on a painting thing. And yeah, there is. I found a picture of a stained glass window Eric Clapton designed for someone. I can't remember whose mansion it's in, but yeah, there's a stained glass window designed by Eric Clapton because he's actually an artist. One of the biggest guitar virtuosos, and he's never studied fucking the guitar apparently. Just like taught himself, sat there and taught himself just by listening to records. Apparently, makes you wonder. Hi there. Yeah, we've sort of gone off on a tangent now. But it's all about the music industry and how weird it is. Yeah, so I would love to do a stream about that. Actually, nail it all down because it is crazy how many of these people that are supposed to have been these massive like music geniuses actually never fucking studied music. They all studied different subjects. So who really wrote all these songs and who really was playing it all on these albums? You know what I mean? And what was it all about, really? Yeah, you like the jazz cigarettes. That's the best thing about jazz, isn't it? Yeah, the jazz cigarettes. Yeah, Ronnie Wood as well. I've seen a painting by Ronnie Wood. Yeah, well, he's done paintings of a few people. You see, he does portraits of his friends studying that. He is good. Yeah, right. I say I didn't want to make this too long because I could have made this really long and read out loads of stuff about Terry Melcher, but just for the purpose of telling you about the Golden Penetrators, you don't really need to know that much detail. And most of my audience are actually old enough to know who he is anyway. But yeah, just for the benefit of younger people watching, he was a big producer. He basically, without him, there wouldn't have been folk rock, and folk rock was a massive genre. Basically, he was the one that produced the Byrds version of Mr. Tambourine Man, because Mr. Tambourine Man was a Bob Dylan song originally. And I went to a Roger McGuinn concert, one of these things called an audience with Roger McGuinn, so where he sits and talks to you in between the songs as well. He doesn't just play the songs, and it was just him and an acoustic guitar sitting down talking. And just before he played Mr. Tambourine Man, he said, yeah, we played this. We had to release this one because they thought the original artist was singing it flat, and everyone went ooh, they said basically because Bob Dylan wasn't singing it right, they got McGuinn to record it. And apparently it's said that Roger McGuinn is the only person playing the guitar on that track. All the rest of them were replaced with the Wrecking Crew. But that song basically started off the whole genre of folk rock. And so it's quite kind of mind-blowing that he was involved in that. Like I say, yeah, just music dies for you, doesn't it? You know, a little bit more every day when you look into the Manson case. It's just like, oh God, yeah. nothing is sacred. Nothing escapes Charles Manson. All our idols. Yeah, that's it, the golden wankers. That's what they were. Yeah. Yeah, Yeah, the Quarrymen. That was the Beatles' earliest fucking iteration, wasn't it? But also apparently the Byrds, because I was like saying, I've been reading loads of articles, and the Byrds had loads of earlier names before they were the Byrds. Something similar. I doubt they would have called themselves the Quarrymen. Do they do quarrying? Do they call it quarrying in America? You probably call it something else, don't you? You know, when you're digging stone. Yeah, the mugwumps as well. That was one of Mama Cass's earlier ones. Oh, the bloody name I couldn't remember. I remember during one of the bloody Mama Cass streams I couldn't remember. She was in a band called the Tritones. The Tritones, and they were nearly the house band for a TV network. But she moved to get closer to the folk rock scene. But she could have been in a house band for a TV show for a few months if she wanted to, but she turned it down. And that was in a group called the Tritones. She was really good at harmonies, obviously, wasn't she? That was her talent, and really good, apparently, at combining different musicians, introducing musicians to each other. And she never got the credit she deserved. She deserved production credits and all this sort of shit, but she didn't get it, did she? It's another thing that killed music for me, seeing how they treated Mama Cass as well. Like, oh my god. Never gave her any credit. You do call it quarries, do you? You still call it quarrying, yeah. So yeah, obviously the quarrymen and men that work at the quarry. And that was what the Beatles' original name was. With the drummer that got murdered, yeah. Because technically they weren't the Beatles then, so you can't say the Beatles' first drummer got murdered because they weren't the Beatles then, they were the Quarrymen. Yeah, Little Boy Blue and the Blue Boys. Yeah, they were called the Rolling Stones for a long time as well. Because, strangely enough, the musician Dick Taylor lives on the Isle of Wight. And my dad knows him. I've met him a few times, but I can't really say I know. But yeah, but he was in the band called the Pretty Things later. But he was in the Rolling Stones before they got big, when Brian Jones was still alive, obviously, and was still there. Because Brian Jones was the original founding member of the Rolling Stones. And yeah, Dick Taylor obviously remembers a few things. Yeah, he left and formed the Pretty Things before they got famous. He was replaced by, yeah, I think Bill Wyman would be Bill Wyman, wouldn't it? Yeah, that replaced him. Yeah. No More Livers for You. Yeah, that was John Phillips. Yeah. In the end, apparently, yeah. Mackenzie Phillips says in her book, yeah, they tried to say he died of heart problems, but actually he went through about two livers before they wouldn't give him another one. So he wouldn't stop drinking. Sure, that sounds interesting, yeah. Paperback called Bikers at War with Jan Hudson. Includes lots of references to the Manson murders and the Straight Satans and Satan slaves. Wonder if that's an archive.org. Because archive.org's back up now and just about working properly. Couldn't add new things to my favourites, but other than that, yeah, you can search it and find stuff. Again, thank God. Yeah, I wonder if that's on there. So that sounds interesting. But a lot of these books, like I've been digging through archives, I found what they published in Oz magazine. And it's just another version of the Paul Krasner article that they published, basically, yeah. Yeah, the last movie I went to, yeah, actually at the cinema. It is hard to bloody think about it now, yeah. I haven't been to the cinema for so long. Yeah. Yeah, Rolling Stones was Brian's band, really, yeah. No, they make it sound like that now. They make it sound like he was useless and they had to do everything for him, yeah. But it's not worth bloody trying to argue with people because their fans just blindly believe everything Keith Richards says and won't believe anything anyone else says. Though there are other witnesses around that remember how it went down and that actually Keith Richards wasn't as invaluable as he thought he was. And Brian did do more. And they used to gaslight him as well, Brian Jones. That was part of the way he was so bloody sketchy, was because they bullied him and gaslit him, you know. And just getting terrible legal advice as well because they kept getting busted. And Brian blamed himself. He thought he was getting the rest of the band busted. When really they were just targeting all rock stars, you know what I mean? It wasn't Brian's fault. Yeah. Yeah, that book does sound good, doesn't it? I'll have to look it up, see if it is on archive.org. It's good to read these things. Yeah, Phillips went through a lot of livers and a lot of daughters. Yeah, shocking situation. And he had his made his comment about Manson, didn't he? Like it's in that Great Party chapter of the Manson file that I read out. But he denies that he slept with Charlie's girls, doesn't he? Yeah, he says that someone rang him and told him that you could come over and just have sex with these girls, but he never. He says he never went and joined in. Of course he would, though. Yeah. Oh, you actually went to the theatre to watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, did you? God. I don't know. I haven't watched it. I've never watched it. Yeah, I might end this now and go to an after show because we're kind of going off on a tangent, aren't we? But thanks for coming, everyone. 72 people here. Like I say, I'll make sure that all the documents get linked in the description if you want to come back and see, because there's loads more you can read about the Terry Melcher and the Golden Penetrators and that. I didn't read out more of Jeff Guinn's book because it then gets to just telling you the usual story that two hitchhikers got picked up by Dennis Wilson and that's how Charles Manson got into his house. But that apparently isn't true. Fucking Charles Manson, Dennis Wilson already knew Charles Manson anyway. And also, the important thing is that Tex Watson was there before Charles Manson was there. And so why are they covering that up and why isn't there more made of that? That the man who actually stabbed these 7 people bloody was living at Dennis Wilson's house before Charles Manson, but they don't talk about that. There's a lot that doesn't get talked about, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, well, the other worry is as well, what if the internet ever does go down? Like if we lose power, we're going to have lost all the hard copies of these books, aren't we? That's the thing that gets me. And when archive.org went down like that, that's a nightmare because so many books are just on there and you don't bother to buy them, do you? Yeah. Or even if you have the book, it's so much easier to search things when they're online and, bookmark things online and that. You come to rely on it so much. It's a nightmare. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Everyone likes it. Yeah, like the stream. And subscribe if you haven't already. So it helps. Yeah, I'm at 1,450 now. So nearly at 1,500. Brilliant. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'll end this now and I'll come back and do an after show because we're just sort of waffling now, aren't we? But yeah, like I say, I didn't want to go into too much more detail about Terry Melcher because most of you are old enough to know who he is anyway. I know from the statistics. And yeah, if you want to read more, then I will link all the articles. And they're all in my Facebook group and on the subreddit. I link all this stuff all the time. So yeah, if you're really interested in what I'm reading and research, because that's what this channel is. It's a research channel, really. I'm not doing highly polished videos. Yeah. Excellent. Yeah, well, I'll end it now and give you a few minutes to stretch my legs and I'll come back for an after show. Okay, thanks everyone. And yeah, it's like every 2 weeks now I'm streaming, so it'll be like not next Sunday, but the Sunday after I do a stream again, and I will probably read out Terry Melcher. I'll see which one's the most interesting, yeah. But yeah, it'll either be Gregg Jakobson or Terry Melcher I read out. My next stream probably. Meaning they're grand jury. No, not grand jury, they're what they said at the trial, yeah. Right, anyway, yeah. See you.